All right. Well, good afternoon and welcome to Healing City, Baltimore. This is our very first Lunch and Learn Lunchtime Learning Series. We are really excited about this new initiative in our organization and so thrilled that you chose to be here with us today. My name is Dr. Melissa Buckley. I am a part of the Healing City Baltimore family. Healing City Baltimore started 2 years ago here in the city as a result of a shooting event that took place over at Frederick Douglass High School. Though there was no loss of life, as you can imagine, the experience was traumatic for all the students, the faculty, and the staff, and the neighbors. As a result of that event, three young people they went to City Hall to testify at a city council meeting. And they really compelled our city leaders to do something, to do something that would help them to feel safer about being at school. If kids can't be safe at school, where else can they be safe at? And so their testimony was so compelling that Councilman Zeke Cohen, who is also a former educator, he partnered with them to author a piece of legislation that is now law. It's on the books. It's called the Elijah Cummings Healing City Act. And this piece of legislation is intended to create a healing city through legislation. So we have a task force. We have trainings that are currently underway, and the hope is that all Baltimore City agencies will be trauma informed and be able to be intentional about reducing and even eradicating trauma. And so, through our Lunch and Learn series, what we are hopeful for is that we will hear from different organizations, different groups, different people throughout our city who will talk to us about the work that they are doing that is trauma informed. Even if they don't call it trauma informed, um, it is trauma informed, and that's why they were approved to be presenters in our series. And so, for our very first presenters, I bring to you today Jenny Barrett and Ann Townsend. Now, no pressure for these two presenters, even though they are the first ones. No pressure at all. But I want to share with you that my colleague Ann Coy, who unfortunately she couldn't be here with us today, but she was really excited about having them here. And I just want to share really quickly what she said. She said that she was excited about working with you both through FELP, and it truly changed the way that she thinks about her kids' emotions. Children do have emotions, and they are important, and they need to be valued and respected, and all of the other things. And so, with no further ado, I turn it over to you both. Thank you so much for being here and for being an official Healing City Baltimore partner.
Thank you so much. It's going to take me a moment because I'm going to share my screen. Let's see here. Share. There we go. So welcome to this Mariposa workshop, how cultural responses to emotions impact our ability to connect. I'm Dr. Ann Townsend, and I'm here with my Mariposa partner, Jenny Barrett. And thank you again, Healing City Baltimore, for organizing this talk. We really are honored to be here with you all today. So today's focus, emotions and our ability to feel them, understand them, accept them, and respond are foundational in our ability to create the type of adult-child relationships that build resilience in the face of stress. So we're going to start by talking about the impact of stress and trauma, and then how through our relationships we can mitigate the impact. There are key adult behaviors that account for the types of relationships that buffer children from stress. Then we're going to try and talk about what are the specific factors associated with them and focus on our meta emotions, how we feel about our various emotions as they play a key role in our ability or inability to connect with others. As part of that, we'll discuss the influence of culture on our meta emotions and therefore for our reactions to children. And finally, we'll give you a strategy to use that you can help to build connections in children that you care for. A little about MARIPOSA. We're a nonprofit organization dedicated to building resilient communities. We're also a partner of Loyola University. We engage communities in ways that understand our diverse backgrounds and experiences, including the role of stress and trauma, in order to disrupt and replace traditional, unhelpful, and even damaging patterns, and replace them with proven effective methods to promote social and emotional learning. It's a mouthful. Resilience is a process, and we have a proven method to reduce stress and equip adults to develop the types of relationships that build emotional resilience in children. I'm a social and emotional scientist, and my doctorate is in family science. For more than 2 decades, I've been researching how children of all ages and backgrounds develop the emotional skills they need to be successful in school and in life. And it turns out the quality of their relationships that children have with key adults, so parents and educators and counselors, it predicts how well they'll do. And yet I've seen so many adults who, despite their desire to connect and support children, get stuck in patterns that actually do the opposite. So I founded MARIPOSA 20 years ago with a mission to change the lives of children by teaching adults how to build these types of relationships that we know account for a child's ability to learn, form relationships, and behave appropriately. I'm going to turn it over to Jenny.
Thanks. Hi, so I'm Jenny Barrett. As an early childhood educator for over 30 years and a special educator, and I'm an administrator, and I'm also a parent. I have to say I have found that this particular method, MARIPOSA method, has been the single most impactful in all the trainings and courses I've ever had. So I was first able to bring it into a school community as an administrator. And Ann Coy's message about when she said Phelps was first English Lutheran preschool and kindergarten. And as the administrator there for many years, I learned about first this MARIPOSA method and was able to bring it into our school community. And what I found is that it changed and improved the whole culture of the school. And it actually really helped me create relationships with my own children and with other adults. And I saw it time and time again actually change the trajectory for many children. Specifically, some children would come to our preschool actually asked to leave other programs and do quite well. And so it has a lot to do with just our general approach before we even do anything else. Separately, or in addition to that, I'm a facilitator. I've been trained as a facilitator with the National SEED Project, Seeking Equity and Educational Diversity. And I'm often overwhelmed with and excited about the overlap and importance of the work in how MARIPOSA method really supports culturally responsive teaching. And I'm really grateful for the work I've been able to do with Dr. Townsend for these past over 12 years.
Thanks. So I like to start by taking in just a deep breath together. So just take a moment if you can to pause and put your feet on the ground, put your hand on your heart. And I'd like us to take in a deep, gentle, collective breath called 4-7-8, where we'll breathe in for the count of 4, we'll hold it for 7, and then we'll breathe out slowly for 8 together. So take a moment and breathe in to the count of 4. Hold it. And breathe out slowly for the count of 8. Thank you. And a kind reminder, just please take a moment to reduce your distractions so you can be present for this hour. So to understand trauma and informed care, resilience, connections, and emotions, it's helpful to understand stress and the role it plays in us and how it can create disconnection. So there's a scientific explanation for why you aren't always able to be at your best or respond to children the way you want to, and why a child within your care may act out or not do what you expect. So let's lean in and explore how stress impacts us and plays out in relationships. So according to brain research, when children encounter a perceived threat to their safety, their brains trigger a complex set of chemical and neurological events known as the stress response. So it activates a natural instinct to protect, causing us to either fight or freeze or flee from the unsafe event. Zaretta Hammond, author of Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain, explains our brains seek to minimize social threats, such as being rejected or feeling disapproval or a global pandemic. When we feel threatened, cortisol is released in the brain. And when cortisol is released, all listening, learning, problem solving, and creative thinking come to a stop. Cortisol is released for up to 20 minutes and remains in our brains for up to 3 hours. So under normal circumstances, these responses to stress are constructive and help keep a child safe. However, when a child operates in overwhelming states of stress or feel fear, their survival responses that may be appropriate in danger-laden situations, such as shutting down or constantly surveying the room for danger, expecting to fight or run away at a moment's notice, it becomes a regular mode of functioning. So even when the dangers aren't present, children may react to the world as if they are. So unable to regulate these states of arousal, they simply can't turn their survival strategies off. And the implications are significant. So you may have heard of the ACEs research, the ACEs study. It's a landmark study in the 1990s by the CDC and Kaiser. And they found that there was a significant relationship between the number of adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, such as coming from a home of violence or divorce or incarceration, that a person experienced, and a variety of negative outcomes. The more ACEs experience, the greater risk for these negative outcomes. In fact, children with 3 or more are at risk for a significant negative impact on their physical, mental, and mental health, as well as their behaviors and their ability to learn. And at the time of the original study, this represented a group that was disproportionately white, employed, insured, college educated, and middle income. And they identified the original 10 ACEs knowing that there were more. But since then, other studies, such as the Philadelphia ACE study, included more, such as racism, bullying, living in an unsafe neighborhood, witnessing violence outside the home, and being in foster care. So note that for every child of color already has 1 ACE score due to racism before any other adverse experiences are added. And now we have a pandemic.
So Hammond points out that not just threatening, but simply unwelcoming environments can create the production of stress hormones even before a specific challenge occurs. So she writes here, if a child belongs to a marginalized community because of race, class, language, or gender, we have to understand their safety threat detection system is already cued to be on the alert for social and psychological threats based on past experience. So it becomes imperative to build social relationships that signal safety. According to the Center for Disease Control, stable, loving relationships buffer against the harmful effects of stress by restoring stress response systems to a steady state. And it's through these relationships that children develop the ability to manage their emotions and develop the competencies that contribute to their overall success in school and life. So this understanding of the power of relationships is backed up by a lot of research, and it's at the heart of the MARIPOSA method. So going back to that ACE study, that even though the scores of 3 or more were linked to many of these negative outcomes in learning, relationships, behavior, long-term health, the good news is that the research shows that there's a subset of children who, despite high levels of stress and trauma, have resilient outcomes, coping skills, hope, pro-social skills, and the ability to seek help. And the single most important factor that accounted for this, a quality relationship with an adult. So along with the child's relationship with their parents, it's been well established that children's academic and social emotional competencies, or lack thereof, are closely linked with the quality of the relationships with their teachers. So it's obvious to know, or you may realize, that children who come to the classroom with challenging behaviors are specifically at risk for conflictual relationships with their teachers. However, When a teacher learns the skills and is then able to form a healthier connection with the student or a quality relationship, the student's more likely to have less conflictual relationships with other adults and therefore can change their trajectory. So our program focuses on strengthening all the adult-child relationships. And so what does that mean? What does a quality relationship look like with an adult? And what types of relationships help a child develop resilience? So researchers have identified these key characteristics of effective adult-child relationships. Dr. John Gottman researched parent-child relationship styles, and he calls the most successful style of parenting the emotion coach. It involves validation, empathy, and it's still maintaining limits and applying consequences. You can see that on the left side of the chart, these qualities. And the effects of this style: children learn to trust their feelings, regulate their emotions, and solve problems. They have high self-esteem, learn well, and get along well with others. In the book that we've referred to already by Zaretta Hammond, and she outlines the characteristics of the effective student-teacher relationship, and she refers to it as the warm demander. It was originally coined by Judith Kleinfeld, this term. And a warm demander has an explicit focus on building rapport and trust, holds high standards also, and offers emotional support and instructional scaffolding so that children can reach those standards, to walk them through that process. It's shown here on the right. So what you can notice that both types of parent-child or teacher-child relationship, there's these common threads in that both relationships that are building resilience include acceptance of emotions and still setting high limits and expectations, and scaffolding or guiding them through the process. I like the term here, in the warm demander earns the right to demand engagement. So by building those relationships and accepting those emotions, you then can hold children to high standards and teach them. All this sounds really good. If you're a teacher watching this video or here today, you may think like, that's what I want to do, or maybe that's what you feel like you're doing. We may intend to accept emotions and still hold kids to high expectations, but a lot gets in the way that creates disconnection despite our best intentions. And to understand that, we really need to talk about meta emotions.
Thanks, Jenny. Dr. Gottman talked about the term meta emotion just to describe the relationship patterns of adults' beliefs about emotions and feelings about emotions and their behaviors or their reactions to children's display of emotions. And our meta emotions are highly influenced by our culture and how we grew up. So these unseen influences impact our ability or impact our reactions. So they even impact our ability to connect. And very often, even with good intentions, that's why we can often create disconnection, which in turn disempower children and further fuel their stress. So their meta emotions are emotions around emotions, hence meta. So just for example, this is kind of an overgeneralization, but people who believe that feelings are helpful or productive, it impacts then how they respond to children when they're displaying certain types of emotions, anger or sadness. And in this case, because of that belief, they're more likely to accept the emotion and also guide children in a collaborative manner. So this combination of beliefs and behaviors is associated with the type of relationship that buffers children from stress. However, when people feel that feelings are unproductive, they're less likely to explore or share or talk about feelings. It prevents them from moving through an issue. So instead, they're more likely to dismiss the emotion in favor of solving or controlling the emotion. People often use what is called solution coaching in their communication around issues that bring up emotion. So when there's an issue, they go straight to the most common sense solution in order to skip over exploring and sharing that emotion. And again, we fall along, we're not really one or the other, but I just thought I'd start with that kind of higher level overview, and then we'll go a little bit deeper. But this combination of of behaviors and beliefs is associated with relationships that are characterized by conflict and disconnection, which we know directly impacts children's outcomes. So let's look more closely at how our meta emotions impact our reactions, and we'll give you some examples of what that might look like.
So here's a chart showing some of the beliefs and then what behaviors that leads to, and then some examples. And I know that when I first heard these, I heard a little too much of myself that I didn't want to hear. So you might hear that. So our meta emotions or our beliefs around emotions can lead to disconnection in these examples. So as you can see here, an underlying belief that focusing on negative emotions will just make things worse will likely result in ignoring or dismissing negative emotions or even disengaging. And as a result, the child will learn that these negative emotions, such as sadness or anger or worry, are wrong. It might sound like, hang in there, you have other friends. You can complain or you can do something about it, or just don't worry about it, or just distracting them. Look at this, or ignoring it altogether. Another belief that you hear comes out in a lot of adults is an underlying belief that negative emotions are manipulative. They're going to lead you to judge or criticize a child's negative emotions, leading to feeling that the child to feeling like that they're actually wrong to feel this way. So it might sound like, stop being dramatic, stop crying, or a lot of times you hear the child just wants attention. Or even when we say calm down, it's sort of a visceral knee-jerk reaction to say that, but the message we're sending when we say that is it's not okay to feel that way. Conversely, someone might believe that emotions are fine, but that there's little you can do but ride them out. And it will lead you to accept it and comfort, but actually offer no guidance or limits around the expression of emotions or problem solving. So it might sound like, oh, I'm sorry, or sit with me, be my helper, instead of resolving whatever reason they are crying. And so this actually will lead to an inability to regulate emotions. So thinking about all the ways we do it wrong, let's think about this emotion coach, or even the warm demander style, the beliefs and behaviors that lead, and the examples here. So conversely, if you believe that negative emotions are an important arena for parenting or for guiding children and connecting, then you're more likely to accept emotions. And if you don't believe you have to fix every problem for the child, you're more likely to listen, empathize, teach problem solving, and then offer guidance. And also a person in this is more aware of their own values and their own emotions. And what that looks like looks different. And it might sound like part of you wants to be included, part of you doesn't like what they're doing. Or you're really trying hard in this class, you aren't sure why you're not getting the grades you want. Or you wish I noticed when other people do the same things you got in trouble for. And adding things like, I want to help. I wonder if there's a way to be included and also have a say. So in this case, you hear a lot of stepping in and accepting emotions, but also still holding children to high expectations and problem solving to get there. Somewhere in here, and likely in the previous slide, you may have seen some underlying beliefs show up in your reactions as well. So looking at this picture, just your first reaction, this is a child, a student in your care. What's your initial reaction? If you're, can chat it out, or we're so small, if you just want to say it, that would be okay too. How does this make you feel?
Hello.
Hi, Valerie.
When I look at that face, I feel a little manipulated. Like this little girl is trying to get me to do something, and I'm supposed to be afraid of her.
Yeah, thank you. Right. So even though you might think to yourself, it's okay to be mad, right? And as women, girls are allowed to be mad too. But when you see that face, that is here. And so that underlying belief that these negative emotions are manipulative is coming out, whether you know in your brain or not, that is not the case. That is going to be how you feel. And therefore, You may or may not respond to this child in a way you wouldn't choose to when you thought about it ahead. You might dismiss her, or, or say, are you trying to scare me? Or something like that. Or I'm not giving in. You might dig in harder as before you even accept her emotions of feeling angry. That's a great example. Thanks, Valerie.
Thanks, Val.
So all over the planet, people have the same set of emotions or feelings. We all experience sadness in the same way and anger and grief in the same way. However, our cultures are very different in what we believe and how we feel about these emotions. For example, one mother I knew told me that when she moved to the US from Japan as a child, she was very overwhelmed in school because they were assigned to make Valentines and kids were just writing, I love you all over the place. And in her home culture, you didn't say I love you so readily. She felt love, but that was a really uncomfortable space for her. Another example of culture influence is that many families also hold different family members to different standards. So it's often observed between boys and girls. Some may not allow a son to show his anger, but require that a daughter repress it, allowing the daughter to exhibit sadness, but not the son. This is a really simplified version of the culture tree that was developed by Zaretta Hammond. But our culture influences the way we respond to emotions, whether we know it or not. I often like the way culture is just like, fish in water. They don't even know what they're absorbing. It's just what they know. And it's the way we were raised or are functioning in our family, in a school or in a group. And it's informed by many factors, including ethnicity, race, gender, class, family history and dynamics, language, religion, age, etc. And note that it goes from surface culture, such as food, language, and dress, which has little impact on trust, to shallow culture of unspoken rules like eye contact and expression of emotions, and then to deep culture, or that collective unconscious that touches on self and group identity and values. Note that 80% of cultures are collectivists, while North America rates high as individualistic. So in other words, in Western values, autonomy is a high value. So if you grew up with that, and chances are you did, with this deep cultural influence, spoken or not, on autonomy versus collectivism, and then you have this student leaning on you on the playground saying, there's nobody to play with, or they're asking for a lot of help or reassurance in class, you might find yourself feeling annoyed or viscerally want to push that away, dismiss those feelings of feeling unsure or anxious, as opposed to responding to those feelings and accepting those feelings before problem solving, which is really the foundation of the effective adult-child relationship. And you might ignore them or skip them, saying something like, it's recess, you're missing it, or you can do it. So just starting to be aware of those levels and how they affect you and how they have a deep impact on you is helpful.
One of our mantras is you can't manage what you can't identify. So emotions and our ability to feel them and understand them and accept them and respond are foundational in our ability to create the types of relationship that we know builds resilience. So you may know this and believe this, and you may have every intention of being an emotional coach or a warm demander in your work. But to do this, we need to understand what gets in the way. How we feel about various emotions plays a key role in our ability to connect. And our meta emotions are highly influenced, as we said, by our culture, and they impact our ability to understand and connect, and very often lead to misunderstanding and disconnection, which in turn disempower children and further fuel stress. Hand it back to you, Jenny.
Thanks. So now let's look at this child. Imagine this is when a child is meant to be participating, or he didn't receive the grade he wanted, or the color chair he wanted. Note once again your initial feelings in response to this child. And you feel free to share that out. I know that when you might believe that this child is allowed to feel sad, and yet when you see this, you're likely to have a reaction. It may not be accepting of these emotions of sadness in him. again, you may feel manipulated, or you might actually feel more towards them. Furthermore, it's important to note that oh, sorry, did somebody want to add something?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I actually feel, I don't want to say I feel bad for this child, but I do feel like this child is struggling and I want to support them in this moment. You know, I don't know if that makes sense to anybody, but that's,
It's leading you to want to connect.
yeah, exactly.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Oh, and Valerie says, I feel curious. What's wrong? It's leading her to want to ask questions, to lean into that. And it's interesting because, you know, a lot of times we do have different reactions to anger versus sadness, right? If he was looking at you, may or may not, but that ability to step in and connect with him, and that's impacted by, right, our cultural feelings around emotions, what we already know. Chances are it's impacted by the work you do, that's how you feel. And then our responses are also going to be influenced by the many biases that are present in all of us. So whether they're a boy or a girl, or what you know about his family or his race. In a study in 2014 with undergraduate white women, the students overestimated the age of Black boys by an average of 4.5 years and found them more culpable than white boys or Latinx children. And in addition, in a 2016 study out of Yale University, they tracked eye movement of preschool teachers. This probably have heard of this before, specifically when watching for problematic behavior. And the preschool teachers were more likely to look at Black boys than white children or even girls of color when they were looking for problematic behavior. So we already know that bias influences how we react to what we see. And that along with all those messages we've had around emotion, just being aware of what's going on in you is the first step towards changing that reaction. Because if your reaction is not to want to lean in and help or accept the emotion, then what is that? What's going on? Because you can't manage, like Ann said, what you can't identify. And this is really ongoing work to start building our awareness. And that's going to take more than just today or even a long time. But there are some key things that you can start to do right now, even while you're unpacking all of those feelings and beliefs. So feeling understood is a necessary component of any quality relationship, and it's true for you and your children. So feeling understood lowers stress responses, builds connection, and buffers children from the impact of stress and trauma. So getting back to what Zurata Hammond said about relationships that signal safety, being understood does that. So imagine you're a child who's not keeping up in math, feeling disengaged. Adults might give lots of advice on what to study, what steps to take. But until you feel understood, you're not likely to take that in. It might be, this is frustrating. And you've tried and you don't feel like it's making sense. Or a child is being teased instead of, why don't you just ignore him? That was hurtful. You're not sure why he's even saying that. It's hard to move through your day with those comments being said to you.
It's a natural human instinct. We learned a lot about this in the work around doctor-patient communication, to resist feeling like as though you're being controlled. It's a protective defense mechanism. And one of the things that that we know is that in order to change our behavior or even consider it, we must first feel understood. So in order to feel understood, if you think of yourself, in order to be understood or know somebody else truly understands you, there's some key things or components. One is that you need to be heard, to have the space to actually express yourself without being interrupted, to have their feelings accepted without judgment or an agenda. And that's the hardest one, especially since we're wired to help and solve. Empathy isn't our default. Our default is to want, and wanting to help is to sometimes protect children from pain. It's not to step in. You need to know that for the other person, that they get it from your perspective, and then have the space to be heard without another demand. Oftentimes, even a question about how you're feeling can feel like another demand, especially given that what we know about, again, if you feel like if your brain it seeks to minimize social threats, one of which can just simply be rejection. And so if a child is in a place where cortisol is being released, in order to stop the cortisol, actually, when we are able to step in and help them feel understood, that's what blocks the release of cortisol. Jenny.
So knowing what's required, some things you can do. So thinking about the requirement of being heard, child needs that. Start with listen with the goal to understand. Actually, we were talking earlier about the workshop I went through with Healing City with there were some teens leading it who were pretty emotionally skilled, I would say. And that's one of the things they asked for from adults. Listen to understand me. Staying out of judgment. It's really hard to do, but emotions are not good or bad. In order for there to be space for the child to be heard without a demand, let go of your agenda. A lot of times when we step in and understand, teachers like they're already linking it to the thing they meant to do or what you're supposed to do about it. Just stop and lean in and listen, and then and step into those feelings, and then communicating that understanding, keeping again any words of judgment or agenda out of that. So it might sound like you just need a break and you're tired of doing all this, or you're feeling a little nervous to join a new class. It doesn't seem fair. That's a common one, whatever, the punishment, the test, the whole situation, whatever it is. You're worried about being left behind this year. You feel left out. It seems like nothing's going your way. You wish you knew exactly how this year is going to be. It's really just their perspective. It doesn't always have to be a feeling word.
And giving it space. One of the things that we found in our work with, we teach a graduate course at Loyola University to counselors, school counselors. And as part of that, they turn in their transcriptions and as they're applying just even this first foundational step of empathy. And we noticed that children with higher ACE scores, they're actually wired to almost react in a bad way the minute the counselor steps in to try and solve. And so it takes a longer time to be in the empathy space to get them to a place where they're even starting to consider changing their behavior or addressing the challenge.
So we've already said, right, that feeling understood is really the foundation for any quality relationship. And we will say that we have a full comprehensive course. We teach a full module on this skill, go deeper in all the ways that we sort of struggle with this. However, for this webinar today, we just want to give you a sense of what it looks like. But
Valerie.
first, sorry, Valerie, put your hand up.
Oh,
You're muted, Val.
52. Do you have a listing somewhere of those statements that you use to communicate that you understand this, as like you just rattle off, Jenny?
That's a great question. We actually developed for our comprehensive course and even our self-study, like a downloadable with a ton of them by category. Because there's categories of things like fairness issues, friendship issues, like power struggles with an adult, things like that, and lots of examples, because it takes time to get that rhythm going, and a lot of our habits and all those other things get in the way of that. But yeah, these are some more examples. Where are you on? You're on the
How
next.
do you sign up for that comprehensive course?
Yes, good question. We're going to give you that link at the end. It's on the website.
Okay.
But you can sign up to try to get into the comprehensive with the weekly sessions and credits and all that. And there's hopefully also ways to get the self-study out there too. But the comprehensive course sign up is on the website.
Okay,
Yeah.
website.
And it takes a lot of practice, and there's a lot that gets in our way. Thanks.
Yeah, I love how you do that. But it's hard. It's not intuitive. And I have to work on empathy and compassion, and culture does have a huge thing to do with it. And my mother used to say that she wished she was Mr. Spock from Star Trek, and that way she wouldn't have any emotions. That was her wish.
That was her wish. She thought she could protect herself from them.
Yeah, yeah. And I was noticing when you had those two pictures, like when I saw the Caucasian girl, I thought she's trying to manipulate me. But when I saw the African American little boy, I was like, oh, he needs some help.
Mhm. Well, you know, really, there was a story recently that I heard about a teacher who was a Black teacher teaching in a predominantly white school, and a girl was being sort of flippant with her. That's not neutrally describing what she did, but she was saying various comments. And at one point, the girl said, "You can fetch that for me." And the teacher had a very obviously strong reaction that was very hurtful. It was not okay. And so it's interesting when you talk about even that directional, like it's both ways, right? These are directional and it goes both ways, that relationship. And when that teacher really complained about how that made her feel and brought that up, other teachers who were white were like, yeah, she does that to me too, not understanding the impact is greater. You know, taking in, there's so many cultural components to why you're going to react to someone a certain way and where that's going to land on them. And so that power differential, as well as how race affects those relationships and culture, are so significant. And so a lot of people don't want to think about that, and it's not going to be undone overnight, but just recognizing, yeah, I did react differently to that. You know, I did think differently because it was a boy or a girl, or it was a little boy of color, and I needed to change that.
Can I jump in here? And I really appreciate this part of the session. So just this morning, actually, someone shared a situation with me where one of her colleagues is a Black woman, and she is the only Black woman that works on this team of all white women. And she happens to be going through a really difficult time. And one of the white women said to her that, you know, just because you're having a tough time doesn't mean that it should affect your work performance. I have my own difficulties as well, and you don't see me, you know. I was flabbergasted, not entirely shocked, because I do know that people are so self-absorbed that they can't see the other person. And a lot of times, and you said this earlier, Jenny, like with your example, you know, that adults will do this to kids all the time, you know. Again, I wasn't shocked because I know that this is just how people are, but the fact that the person was so oblivious
So
to
ignorant.
impact, oh my God, like it was painful hearing this.
That's the hardest for me, is to step in and actually, I just get angry.
Yes.
Yeah, and want to prove wrong or educate. And I know that I'm not going to be heard when I go about it like that either. But the importance of the education, like, that's why you're working in the work that we all do.
Right. And what she really could have used was another, you know, a white ally in that team to say, hello, hey, you just took someone who's under a great deal of stress and then you just judge them and further flared. And if you're really expecting any work out of this person, you dashed all attempts at that, much less how she's going to function as a person the rest of the day. I mean,
Precisely, because it was, I mean, her comments were completely void of empathy. It wasn't even about the race. And trust me, like, you all don't know me at this point, but I am definitely pro-Black to the max. You know what I mean? But this really was not a race issue in its entirety. It's just, you're such a jerk.
Yes, it was just talk about disconnection. Yeah.
Yeah, and it comes from that belief. It comes from that base belief, right? And we know that those, you know, it's interesting, just when I read the book, Waking Up White, there's a whole bunch of characteristics of the dominant white society. And when you read them, I remember when I was reading it, and I was like, snap picturing of all the pages and sending it to Dr. Ann Townsend, like, this is why we're doing all the work, because we've been told all the wrong things all these years. Like, that this is why we're constantly trying to get people to say the real problem or express the emotion, because the message is, You button that up and you show up and you don't show anger, you don't show up sadness, you don't show that. And that's the value. And that was what she was trying to say to this person when all of it is actually not helpful and really harmful, actually. Thank you for that example. I mean, I think, really creating a culture of compassion, it has to be between the adults too. It's almost impossible. If you don't get some for yourself, then how are you meant to give it to the children in your care? It's really hard.
Can I share one more thing? Another example? Okay.
Yeah.
So my godson, he's 5, and recently, like his parents kept telling him stop bringing. He has like these like mini Thomas the Train toys, and he takes them everywhere. Like he sleeps with them, like everything. So he even goes to the bathroom with them. So his parents keep telling him, don't take the toy to the bathroom. Okay, because obviously you can accidentally flush it down the toilet. Well, what do you think happened? He flushed it. His mom, she was so perfect. I really had to praise her for her response because he was devastated. He lost it. He cried and he was like, Thomas is gone. Just a complete mess. And his mom really affirmed him, and she held him accountable, but it was more so acknowledging and recognizing that he had some real feelings in this moment. Even though he's 5, and sure, you could say, well, you should know better. I mean, we should all know better, but we all still do things that we shouldn't do. But kids need to know, they need to know that feelings are real and they're valuable and respected. That's how they grow up to be adults who are able to empathize and also to be able to emote. So I just want to share that.
No, that's such a great example. She was able to do both. Oftentimes we do one or the other, like empathize, but then there's, no component of the guiding, or it's just about the agenda to teach them, not to bring the toy into the bathroom, but she did both. That's very hard.
Yeah, it's hard to refrain from saying, I told you so. But yeah, you saw so we had those examples up. Okay, sorry, where are we now?
Yeah, so what
great. This is helpful. Yeah, sorry, do you want me or you, Anna? I'm comfortable.
I can go. So yeah, speaking of what gets in the way, trying to solve the problem too quickly, kind of to your point, to your story, or even saying things like, I understand, it often has the opposite effect, because our knee-jerk reaction is, no, you don't. Trying to solve, we're all wired to solve things. So why don't you just play with the other kids and ignore Sam? Or how about signing up for math help? It is so, I think that's one of the most common ways, is not slowing down enough to give space for them to feel understood. Asking questions, that's a really, really common one. It's really hard to unlearn that, especially if you've been taught that feelings are very important. It often leads us to then stepping in and asking questions instead of simply responding in a way that simply captures or describes their experience. And we know that when we ask questions, it stops that positive effect that we know happens when you just simply describe, even often neutrally, what a child is experiencing. So things like, why do you think they didn't include you? Or what do you think, why do you think, I'm going to share these notes, I'm sorry.
Yeah, like, why do you think you're the one who I called on or got in trouble? Like yours says that, what you're trying to do is teach. And I can relate to these too, because when you're taught to be a teacher, you're taught to teach cognitively, whereas emotions are not learned cognitively and processed cognitively. So those are good strategies when you're trying to figure out why you think your little science hypothesis worked, or why you carried the 2. That's really helpful, right? But when people apply these same things to emotional things, and it's triggering, and it doesn't help a child process the emotions, and it creates, in some cases, a stronger stress response.
Yeah, and Jenny, back to your point, she went to a talk through Healing City, and the next 2 are telling a story of your similar experience or sympathy. But you want to share what you were just saying?
Yeah, that whole concept. So many people, when we teach this, I can't tell you how many workshops we go through. Like, yeah, I did that. I told them, I used to be left out all the time too. You know what I did? And yes, that's a lovely, we kids love to connect with us and hear our stories. But when they're being left out, they're like, stop. That has nothing to do with me. You don't understand. It's not actually helpful. As separately, it's lovely to share your stories, but it has to be about them. And it's similar to these teenagers that were in this Healing City workshop that I went to. That's what they were saying. They're like, it doesn't feel like it's what about us? That's about you. Back to you again, right? And they're like, what about me? And again, sympathy is really different. Like nobody wants to be like, I'm so sorry for you. Oh, that's so sad. Come sit here. You have no friends. Like nobody wants that. But these are these habits that speak to the very inclination we have. Valerie, you said it earlier. This is not natural. We are wired to run from pain. And, even in our own kids, we just want to quickly make it go away in many cases. So,
Did you have a question, Valerie?
sorry.
I went to this workshop, first aid, mental health, first aid, and youth mental health first aid. I don't know if you've done it, like CPR, but this is mental health.
Ooh.
So it teaches you to notice people that are distressed and what you can do just to kind of help them so they get to the proper therapy or the doctor or whatever. So the guy, the trainer was so good. And he had this little acronym that he and his wife say before they start talking to somebody that's in distress. And it was wait. And you ask yourself, why am I talking? Like WAIT, why am I talking?
Oh, that's great.
Before I start saying like, oh, I lost some friends, all I did was go get some new friends. Like, are you talking to discover your own story? Are you talking to make yourself look good? Am I talking to get them to stop talking? Am I talking to reduce my own stress? Am I talking so people will know what I know? He said, wait, why am I talking? That is not original to me. That is not a Valeism.
Well, you do have Valerieisms that we could share, but that'd be a whole nother Healing City workshop.
But I'm stealing that. Isn't that good?
That's awesome.
I need that.
Here's some more statements to leave you with that are really comparing statements that even well-intended are dismissing versus accepting. Jenny.
So for example, you don't hate math, you just need to practice. Literally telling them you don't have that feeling. And supposed to just, you can step in and say, you're really frustrated, or real friends don't leave you out. Just instead, that really hurt. There's an agenda there to teach, right? And you're dismissing the feelings. He didn't mean it. Just ignore it. I always say that if you like the kid, you're like, they didn't mean it. If you don't like it, you say, play with someone else, instead of letting children figure out their relationships and feel empowered. And just to say out loud, like, it seemed like he was making fun of you. This is the worst day of your life, then your life can't be that bad. Right? I know I used to want to say that to my son all the time because that was his favorite phrase, instead of just saying nothing's going right for you today. This is a big one. We can talk when you get yourself calm. That message of getting calm, like it again tells them their feelings are not okay and that they should be able to calm themselves, as opposed to you're really angry. And then you can set a boundary on safety, right? We can talk if you can keep your hands to yourself. Like you can set that up, but not telling them they have to be calm. So we only had an hour today, and we touched on some really big topics. It takes a really long time to unpack our reactions to emotions, our relationship with children, and all of those cultural influences and the biases that are there. So just knowing that through your relationship, you actually do have the power to greatly impact a child's experience and their resilience. And it starts with helping a child feel understood. So hopefully today, or if you're watching this recording, you identified some ways in which your underlying beliefs or feelings get in the way. Maybe you recognize yourself in some of those reactions and how your own culture and biases influence that. And you can start today just by starting to step in and understand and connect before any other agenda.
Oh, whoops, sorry. Okay, me. So we're going to be offering, we're offering a free series this summer. Now we're at the last one, which is coming up on August 4th, and you can register on our website. Do you want to put that in? Well, I guess it doesn't make sense to put it in the chat unless we're sharing that out, but it's mariposaeducation.org. And you can also get access. If you can attend this, you'll get a recording. We're also offering a free mini course, which is 3 short videos that come to your inbox each day. The first is on how stress hijacks our brains. The next one is the power of feeling understood. And the third is 1 strategy. It's around neutral descriptions just to get started. So finally, we're going to offer a public session of our comprehensive programs that teaches our 5 methods and skills. And if you're interested in getting on the wait list, Valerie, you had said that, you can check out our website again, and you can put your name on the list there as well. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks, Healing City.